May 13th is the next meeting?
In the meeting
Okay, I'll find out.
with a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think everybody can hear me at this point. I just want to introduce the people that are here tonight. The table on my left has David Perry, the chair of the Budget Committee, Laura Ebke, vice chair of the Budget Committee, and I'm sorry, I can't see, is that Joseph Souza? Joseph. And Joseph Souza, a member of the Budget Committee. On this table is Council President Ed Roderick, Council Vice President Denise DeMedeiros, Town Solicitor Andrew Tights, and myself, Town Clerk Nancy Mello. I'm going to just make a few comments on the procedure tonight. Since there are no alternate petitions, the only petition which will be presented tonight is from the Budget Committee. They will present their full presentation and their 4 resolutions that they have on the ballot.
5.
And then Councilor Roderick will present the council resolution, which is also on the ballot. At that point, then the audience can ask whatever questions. I ask that you please go up to the mic, that you state the question, you state your name and your address, and then time will be allowed to respond. Please, if the question has already been asked, try not to be redundant and allow this to continue at a steady pace. And just because it gets rushed at the end, I'm going to make a couple of announcements for the FTR now. As we all know, the FTR is going to take place on Tuesday, May 21st. There are 3 poll locations on that day. The VFW, which will be handling precinct 3301, 3302, and 3304, which is basically the northern end of town. Country View will be handling District 3303 and 3305. And the Amicable Church will handle District 3306 and 3307. That's a little change from last year. We used Sandy Woods, but the state has some issues there this year, so we are using Amicable Church for that district. There'll also be early voting for those who want to just sign an affidavit saying that they will not be able to vote on the 21st. We will have voting at the town hall on Thursday, May 16th, from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, on Friday the 17th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and on Saturday, May 18th, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Now, for anyone that needs a mail ballot, you have until 4 o'clock on May 6th to apply for the mail ballot, to fill out a mail ballot application. We have just been informed today that they have at least the mail ballots have already been printed. So we're going to pick them up in the morning and we will get them right out in the mail starting tomorrow. After that, if you have not applied for that mail ballot and you are not going to make that May 21st, your early voting on those 3 days is the only way you'll be able to vote. Also, you must be a registered voter, and that deadline has passed. So if you are not a registered voter in Tiverton, you are not able to vote at the FTR. Keep in mind when you do come to vote that we will be requiring identification, the same identification that you would have used at the last elections in November. And we did tape up a few sample ballots because we had hoped that we would have the printed ones by tonight, sample printed ones, but we didn't, so we just photocopied some. And we've also photocopied some of the poll locations and combined districts. They've been well advertised in the paper. If they haven't been in the paper, it's because they're in the upcoming editions. We've also advertised the actual copy of the ballot in there. So everybody should be clear enough. We are utilizing 3 polls again, even though we may not have as large a turnout. We're certainly hoping that people will turn out to vote for this, because even with only 1 petition, it's important for the people that supported the FTR to get out and vote to show that is the way we want to go. And that's all I have. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Nancy. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants and all the people who helped us in putting this budget together. The budget process actually starts the day it ends. It's a year-long process, and it's done by a lot of people. I'd like to thank the school committee for their help in putting their budget together. They came before us at least 4 times. Every time they had something new, they would come down and present it to us. I'd like to thank them for that. The town council actually spent a lot of time on the budget this year also, and we thank them for their recommendations and what input they had into the budget. Mr. Gonzalo was there every night helping putting this budget together with us, and the department heads who came before us at least once, some of them came before us twice, with their proposals for their individual budgets. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for helping us in putting this budget together. Now, budget, did the school department get everything that they wanted? I don't think they did. Did the town municipal side get everything that they wanted? I don't think that they did. But I think what happened is we came to a conclusion where I think the schools can live with what they have. I think that the town council and the town side municipal can live with what they have, and the taxpayers will be able to not have to spend too much more money this year because we kept the taxes down just like we did last year. So we'll go through the presentation. We have a lot of slides, and I'm not going to read everything to you. It's up on behind us here. We're going to go through the bottom line, the highlights, school department, municipal, and landfill. There are some things I will read because I think they're important, but I won't be reading the whole thing. So we'll start with that. The next one is the proposal for appropriation and tax levies. Now, the appropriation for the schools and municipal expenses, that gives the body permission to spend specific sums of money from the general fund. Set the maximum tax levies to fund the appropriations. And again, if you read below, it gives the town permission to tax more vehicles, real and tangible property. And because there's only one proposal, you only have to vote for the one. And we would be first if there were 2, but there aren't 2, so we'll be the only one on there. Proposal for the appropriation and tax levies, and this comes down to what schools will be receiving, $28,729,425, and this will also be shown later on in other documentation that we have. Appropriations for the municipal side was $18,419,880, and the levy property tax not to exceed $37,519,966, which is an increase to the prior year's certified tax net tax levy of 2.2%, and included motor vehicles tax levy not to exceed $1,409,000, and real and tangible property tax levy not to exceed $36,110,966. And these were all recommended by the Budget Committee.
This is, let me jump in for just a second. This is what you'll be seeing on the ballot. This is the proposal that will be on the ballot.
Okay. Okay, we have number 2, resolutions, And the resolutions stand apart from the proposal for the appropriations and tax levies. And what this does is the charter allows the resolution to appear on a ballot. So anyone that wants to put a resolution on a ballot can put a resolution on a ballot. The Budget Committee, we have 5 resolutions, and the Town Council has 1. And now we'll go through the...
Right. I should just want to note that unlike the proposal for the appropriations and tax levies, the resolutions you vote to accept or reject.
The first one is the most important one, and we urge everyone to make sure that you vote for this one to approve. Without this one, we won't have a budget. And as you can see below, what it does is, and this is one of them that I'll read, that the expenses and revenue budgets, both itemized by account, that support the proposals for appropriations and tax levies, which receives a majority of vote cast by the electors at the financial town referendum, shall be adopted as the Tiverton General Fund budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2014. So if that one is not approved, then we have no budget. So we have to make sure that we
That's what we
vote
explained.
for number 1.
And kind of go into the reasons on the next
And
slide.
the next slide actually gives us the reasons, like I just said.
But before you go on to the next one, could I just comment on that? I don't think that's relevant on this. I don't think that is the effect if people vote against it. That applies if there were more than 2 budgets. But the whole point of this whole charter system and the FTR is that people cannot vote against a budget and that there be no budget. The legislative history and the way it's written make clear that if you don't like the budget, you have to go put your own counter budget forth. It's not simply enough to vote no, which is why there isn't a reject on the budget item. And this wouldn't do it either. This only really makes a difference if, again, there's more than 1 budget. So even if this were rejected, it would not mean no budget.
It reverts back to the previous year, actually.
Pardon me?
It reverts back to the previous year's budget.
No, the Budget Committee, if there's 1 vote in favor of the budget itself, then that is the budget that's adopted.
Yes, but if there were none, then it would revert back.
If there were no votes at all in favor of the budget, then yes, it would probably revert to the thing. If nobody showed up and nobody voted for it, then yes.
Is that a yes or a no, Andy? Okay, so we go on to, town is required to approve the general fund budget that is balanced. The line items on the docket for the FTR. Budget resolution number 1 clarifies, like Andy just said, to the voters for the general fund expenses and the revenue budgets. And I think that's enough for that page. Number 2, again, resolves that the municipal capital accounts be restricted and for the purpose for what they were authorized for. And you'll see those as we go forward. We have, I think, 6 new items in capital. And the purpose for that is to make sure that when we put them in for the specific item, when you vote on this, they go towards that specific item. They can't be spent anywhere else. Resolve 3. This is the town referendum appropriates a sum for municipal operation and capital expenses that include the amount to fund the revaluation account. Now, what we did is we looked at the revaluation account over the last few years, and we have a 3-year reval and then a 10-year reval. Now, the 3-year reval doesn't cost us as much as the 10-year total revaluation. So what we wanted to do is put money in there every single year and spread it out over the 10 years, so that when we come to the 10-year revaluation, we won't have to put a large lump sum into that 10th year. So again, I think this is another good resolution, and we should make sure that we vote for this one also. Just to revert back to Andy's comment, if there were another proposal put in here and someone requested $20,000 instead of our 53, I think we put in.
Yeah.
that would make the difference to vote for us, and vote for the budget committees instead of the other that was proposed. But seeing there is none, again. Number 4, and this is a new restricted account that we wanted to put in, and it's, again, we're looking at going forward. The town referendum approaches sum for municipal operations and capital expenses that include an amount to fund the elections. We have the same thing with the elections. You have a 2-year midterm election, and you have a 4-year presidential election. Now, a 4-year presidential election, of course, would cost us more money than the 2-year regular election that we have. So again, we spread out the money over the 4 years so that we, again, don't have to put a large lump sum into that 4th year. And again, we hope that you vote for this one. And 5 is one that was in last year, and we changed the wording around a little bit so that you won't be seeing this one in next year's. And what it does is that any unencumbered funds at the end of the fiscal year, with the exception of Public Works Department operation funds, that will be permitted to be used solely for further paving, as said funds will be returned to the general fund. So what it does is, any funds that are left over from the Department of Public Works do get rolled over into the paving account. If we had surplus money in supplies for the town clerk, and she was appropriated, I'll just take a number of $5,000. When we look at it at the end of the year, she only used $4,500. $500 would go back to the general fund. This one doesn't. This one puts that money into the paving account, which we solely need in the town. If you look at the streets out there, they're in pretty rough shape. And that's why we're trying to do this.
Right, I would just add on to that, the intent and why it says operations is that the intent is to move any monies that are left over within the operations account into paving. So if there's money left over from snow plowing, if we didn't use all that money, if there's money left over from repairs that they didn't use, it'll get rolled over for paving. But if there should be excess money in a salary account or one of those accounts in DPW, it will not be rolled over. It's just the operations.
Okay. Next, we have bar graphs. And I think these are very interesting, as you'll see. On the left-hand side, you'll see 45.9 million, and on the right-hand side, you'll see 47.2 million. And you'll see a plus of 1.2 million or a 2.8% increase. Municipal, you'll see 31% in last year's, and you'll see 31% in this year's, with a plus in the middle of 484,000, or a 3.4% increase. Our debt service stays at 8%, and as years go on, the debt service should go down unless we add new buildings or whatever we're going to do to increase the debt. And then the school department, you'll see 61% in 13 and 61% in 14 for $812,000, or a 2.9% increase. And this just shows you, where our money is going. It shows you a pie chart, and if you look at it, and we have some data that we looked at, it really hasn't changed that much over the last 5 years. It's been pretty consistent at the 61, 31, and the 8%.
And just to add a little bit to that, what I think is interesting is that the municipal is going up 3.4. The debt is going down minuscule, 0.2. And the school is going up 2.9. But everyone keeps the same piece of the pie. That the allocation remains the same as last year. So it's fairly equitable.
Okay. We have another chart for the tax levy.
Revenues.
The revenues. And you'll see the 45.9 on the top, on the left, and the 47.2. And then you'll see a couple little arrows with 150,000 on the left for abatements, and that's because it was a full evaluation. And over on the right, you'll see $55,000 for abatements. When it's not a full evaluation, the abatements usually go down quite a bit. But you'll see the tax levy at 80% with $804,000, or a 2.2%, and the tax levy on the right at 79%. The local sources at 6% on the left, and at 6% on the right, with a negative $10,000, or a negative 0.04%. And state sources actually on the left at 14%, and on the right up 1% at 15, at $399,000, or 5.9%. We have some documentation that's very interesting at the back, I-1, page I-1, that Laura will bring up later on, and it'll show you what happened to this town for the last 5 and 10 years, and why our taxes were higher in that time frame than what we're doing right now. It was a combination that it was like the perfect storm.
Can I just throw in my little 2 cents here?
Absolutely.
That the levy went down just by 1%, and it's really because of the money from the state went up 1%, which is a nice little bit of a change. I wouldn't say it indicates any big long-term trend. The numbers on the top of the bars, that's the total revenue. And you'll see, if you look at the 45.9 for 2013 and the 47.2 for 2014, if you go back to the prior chart, you'll see the same numbers on the top.
Are these microphones on? Because I'm not hearing anything through the loud.
Is that better, Roger?
Yes.
Okay. The same numbers are on the top. So we have a balanced budget. You have expenses equals the revenue.
And we also have a sheet that'll show that also.
Yep.
And the highlight is the tax rate. Budget Committee recommendation calls for an estimated 1.99% increase to the real property tax rate, which rounds up to 38 cents per $1,000 of value. If you look at the estimate for 2014, you'll see 19.368, and then below that 19.37. We rounded it up to the cent, and the change on the right is 0.378, again rounded up to 0.38. It equals a 2% increase.
And that's an estimate.
And that's an estimate. It's we don't receive the final numbers until after the vote is taken, actually, for the budget. But it's been close, very close. Next, some of the highlights that we have. School safety. Town council and the school committee came together at a meeting, and after everything that's been happening around the country, we decided that we needed a school resource officer, and that's the SRO. And what they did is, you'll see the split up of how it's paid for. The school expense is $50,400, and you'll also see that in the very last page of the...
We have it right now.
Oh, okay. You'll see that also as a lump sum credit. The municipal net expense is $21,121 for a total cost of $71,521. It's 180 days for the school, and that's how many days they're open. And then the rest of the time, he'll be working as a regular
Please speak closer to the microphone. They're
police officer.
that far away.
Okay, Roger, I'll try eating it.
I would also believe that it would help for anybody that's going to watch this on TV later that can't crank up their volume to 100-fold of what it starts at.
Okay, next page.
If you go on the next page, you can find in the docket, which I'm going to show the front of, so that everybody can see that it's that nice salmon-colored docket. And if you go to page 13, you'll see that on the top with the yellow lines highlighted there, that's some of the line items you can find on page 13 where some monies are allocated for the school resource officer. The idea, the accounting, just not to get too detailed with it, is that it's not just the salary for the school resource officer, and you'll see the salary line has a little footnote 4 next to it, and then there's holiday pay, education incentives, sick leave buyback. Further down the page, there's state psychological tests, whatnot, and they're all footnoted on page 13, and then you add into that the insurance and the Social Security. So all the expenses for the school resource officer are in the general fund expense budget, and then if you turn to page 19, you'll see the bottom of page 19, which is on the bottom of this slide here, that there's a credit for the $50,400 that's coming from the school. So that's how it works, if you're interested.
Okay, next slide. Total school appropriations increased $812,000 or 2.9%, and we'll go through the increases and the decreases. Salaries were up $300,000. The shared regional cost for special education was up $400,000. Now, there's a piece of legislation, I believe, was put in by Representative Canario. What it does is, if we have to send a child out to another school, the Bradley School, for instance, we're at a 4% cap. Well, the Bradley School can charge us anything that they want. They're not at a 4% cap. So if they wanted to increase the cost of the child to 10% or 12%, they could, where we're at a 4% cap. So the legislation that he put in will put them also at the 4% cap.
I'd just like to clarify, that's, if it was passed, it would be for students that would have the same services from
Correct.
one year to the next. That's all it deals with.
Right.
So if a child is identified with disability that require new services.
Excuse me, can you use the mic, please, again? To be fair to the people who are watching this later on television, we should have it all spoken. Thank you.
The legislation that's proposed by Representative Canario deals just specifically with students who are out-of-district placements like Bradley, who would receive the same services from one year to the next. It wouldn't apply to students who were identified with additional needs, because we still have to meet their needs under federal and state law. So the bill, and I don't know where it stands right now, would only deal a very narrow view of students that would receive same services year after year. So there would be a cap.
Okay, thank you. Another new item, athletic music stipends for the Ranger School resource officer. Potential 5% reduction in federal grants through the sequester, and I believe that came to $38,000. The decreases, the health insurance premium reduction, and that's both the school side and the municipal side. They're in a collaborative that helps with that. Unemployment and the energy, fuel, oil, and natural gas was a big help decrease in the cost. Capital expenditures, we're committed to use savings, the school department, from last year's appropriations. And what they're doing with it is the wastewater treatment facility, I think, is in progress already, is being worked on, and that's a minimum of $400,000 for that. The fire suspension system, the auditorium seats that you're sitting in right now have all been refurbished, the ones that were marked off last year and for probably 3 years, and they look very nice. Computers, and they're also going to do a facility study. And the facility study is going to be done independently by an outside organization, and it will determine what the needs are for the school committee. And I think that's a great idea to have that done.
Just to make a little note on the capital expenditures, You'll notice in the docket that the school does not have many capital expenditures itemized within their budget. All of these capital expenditures that you see are being paid for from prior year's appropriations. The school department knew they were going to have issues with the wastewater treatment, so they worked hard to save money so that they had the monies available to pay for that. And then the monies that were returned to the school from the couple of years of legal battles, they saved, and they're using it to purchase and improve capital items, which the Budget Committee is thankful for, because then the capital expenses are not in the budget.
Okay, municipal expense increases. Salary account, I spoke about it before, it's up $300,000, but this includes all the department heads, treasurer, town clerk, all receiving pay increases, which some of those people haven't received increases in a long time. So we're happy that we were able to get them increases in this year's budget. And the increases in the salary accounts for future negotiation needs, and that's under the town council's budget. Police department.
Just to just jump in, I don't want, the salaries for the school increases were about $330,000. On the municipal side, if you total them all up, it's somewhere around $280 or $290.
Okay. Police department, we added one new patrol officer, and we're going with 3 dispatchers for an increase of $289,000 or 10.7%. And the reason for that number is that in order to get the new police officer into the academy, I believe he doesn't go in until July. It's a 9-month process through the academy, so that while he's in the academy, we're incurring overtime until he gets back out of the academy and is put on the road as a patrolman. And I think it's a 1-year probationary period when he does get on the road. The insurance liability workman's compensation increased $45,000 or 15%. And that was due to budgeting for last year. We under-budgeted it last year. We've seen what we did, and we made the adjustment for this year.
And just to jump in for a minute, back to the police department, the increased demand on the department and why it's so important that we hire these replacement officers for those who are retiring and whatnot and get them on the road, is you'll see some stats here that Chief provided us that was kind of an eye-opener for the Budget Committee. On the top, you'll see 2011 and 2012 into 3 different categories: crimes against persons, property, and society. And you'll see the biggest line there is the property. It's not the highest percent change, it's a 10% increase. But that's a pretty big number. We were kind of surprised at those numbers. And then on the bottom are the type 1 crimes that the FBI keeps track of. And it gives you a way to compare yourself across different towns. And we don't have the numbers for 2012 for all the other different towns, but you'll see in 2011, Newport is not up there, but Newport is the only city, that has a higher rate of type 1 crimes than Tiverton. You'll see in 2011, we had higher type 1 crimes, number of type 1 crimes than Bristol, or our neighbors, Middletown and Portsmouth. So that was kind of revealing, we thought, and worth putting in there for people.
And with the toll on a bridge, it's probably only going to go up higher because they're not going to want to pay the $4 to go over it to commit a crime.
And commit a crime and come back.
They're gonna pay $8
Unless they steal a car with an easy pass. Okay, next one is the police pension plan. And there was quite a bit of discussion on this one. What we did was we looked at the actuarials that came back, and we thought that it needed some more money to be put into it. So what we did was, we increased it by $100,000. There's a very good,
You want to go next?
yeah, if you bring up the slide,
Okay, it's up.
it's up, there we go. We can see that we're paying out more money than we're putting in. And I don't think that's a good way to do business. I think these people have worked for the town for many years. They deserve their pensions, and I think that we should fund their pensions accordingly. There is a plan in place, and it was submitted up at the State House by Mr. Gonzalo. I don't know if it's been accepted yet, but I've been watching a lot of TV lately. I've been watching Channel 18, and everybody's going before that panel with their pension plan, and it seems like everybody's in trouble throughout the whole state, which we're not the only ones. But I think that we have to do a prudent diligence and increase that by 100,000 like we did, so that we stay kind of current and hopefully someday catch that number.
And I'll just throw in my 2 cents also. It's important to note that the actuarial study is a very important, and it sets the baseline for what we need to do to improve or to pay for the police pension. And the numbers that you're seeing on the screen now come from the audit, and it's just 1 year, but it raised enough flags with the Budget Committee to be concerned that we need to be providing more money. So our hope is that we can sit down with the council and the pension board members and kind of get on the same page with this, so that we're all in agreement going forward.
Let me just add one thing.
Sure.
I just wanted to add that the police pension is solely the town's responsibility. They're not in the state system. It is basically just a private plan that we provide for our police department. And in years past, I guess we allowed it to grow, the unfunded portion of it, to close to over $8 million. And that's why we're having to make it up now. So this was a tough decision, but what we tried to do is right the wrongs that were happening in the past to bring this pension system back into, so it's, if we just let it go, it just grows in problem. So this was the least we could do to try to correct the problem. That's kind of what we've done through this entire budget. We've tried to just get enough money in different areas so that we're not going backwards. We're just basically maintaining what we have now. Hopefully the pension, we're going a little further, and we're going to get caught up in it. Thank you.
Okay, these are the capital expenses that we have, the increases of 101,000. For the fire department, we'll have new monitors and defibrillators. And for those of you who went to the fire department and saw the presentation that was done by the fire chief, you would really want new monitors and defibrillators. The ones that we have are working, sometimes not that well. So we will have new ones. They're replacing the air packs and the air bottles, 25,000. Half the roof on Station 2 for 21,000. And the radio system repair for 5,000. Police department, upgraded department computers for 12,000. And this is a 3-vehicle cycle. We go 3-2. So the 82,000 is for the 3 vehicles that we'll be purchasing for the police department. And I believe 2 of them are going to be SUVs, all-terrain SUVs. So the total is 214,000 for capital. On the bottom, you'll see that those are payments of 2 of 5 on fire department rescue trucks. The pumper truck is a 4 of 10. The engine 1 is 2 of 10. DPW, the 1.5 truck with plow, is a 4 of 5. And the new item we'll be purchasing this year for the DPW is a 6-wheel truck with a plow and a sander for $44,500. It was a very tough winter, and I believe we had 3 or 4 trucks whose axles actually snapped while they were out there plowing, so we'll be piecing those back together. But the equipment that's down there is really old, and again, we have to start thinking to the future and buying pieces of equipment a little bit at a time, and as we can. So the total municipal capital is $435,045. And
Well, I just was going to say on the, as far as the fire department and the roof, it was a little bit of a question on why we're only doing half of the roof at a time. Well, we did look at it, and we know we have to do the second half next year, but we did the senior center, we did it over 4 years, one section at a time. And when we're done with the north end, we're probably going to have to do Crandall Road because the roof out there is starting to look pretty bad in sections. So it was part of that long-term plan where we'll do a little bit each year, keep up with it, and we won't have water leaking into our buildings, you know, causing more problems. So it is a long-term plan to replace the roofs on the majority of the town's buildings that need it.
okay, some of the highlights that expenses decreased. The first one is the health insurance, decreased by $137,000 or 6.2%, and that was thanks to the council and Mr. Gonzalo negotiating new contracts. We got the rates down. Streetlights, we closed some streetlights 3 years ago. We looked at the ramifications of what we did, and everything was going all right, so we decided with the council and to reduce some more of the streetlights.
It's just the dollar amount. We're not shutting, the council hasn't decided to shut down any more streetlights.
Right.
It's as a result of past decisions. The council looked at what we're actually paying out for the streetlights and found that we were safe to cut that line item by $10,000.
And these are actual cuts.
Right.
They're not decreases, they're actual cuts
They're
from
right.
last year.
They're decreases from last year's
From last year's
budgets.
budget.
Right, they're cuts to last year's
Right.
budget.
The heating for $58,000, decreased $11,000 or 15.4%. And that was the town hall, the senior center, North Tiverton Fire Station, which we switched from oil to natural gas. That was a huge saving for us.
Which the council and Mr. Gonzalo were able to do with energy grants. So that's been a good help for the town.
We also took a look at the gas and oil, and we came up with a $367 for gas and $387 for oil for next year. We're also looking at putting in a new metering system at the DPW. Instead of, now we have a slip-based operation. Now we'll have a swipe card where when you go down there, you'll have to swipe your card, and it will monitor who's swiping the card and how much gallons that they're taking and putting into the cars. And that will give us an even better idea going forward with the budgets.
When you go through, I'm just going to jump in here for a minute because I'm surprised, Dave, with a different slide order. The gas and oil that we looked at, we spent a lot of time on the gas and oil for the 4 different sections in the budget: the fire, the police, the DPW operating, and the landfill. And we made some comparisons back to what we actually spent in 2012 and looking at what we've spent year to date. And most got decreases versus even 2013, some from 2012. The one that got the least reduction, in case going through the docket you notice that, is the fire department, and that's due to the increased number of calls. So we put in this slide that shows you the increase in incident responses that the fire department has seen over the past few years. Okay, I'm done. Next.
Next one is municipal expenses decreased. The legal, $45,000 or 14.9%. And what we did is, again, we looked at historical norms, and reduced it to the 45,000. Bay Street is kind of behind us now, and there are some others that are behind us, but we don't know what's going to come forward, and we know that. There could be some large ones that we don't know about, and hopefully there isn't, but we just went with the what we thought were the historical norms and reduced it to the reduced it by 45,000. Next one, the planner's salary. This was highly debated. What we ended up doing is we came to an agreement to fund the salary account with $20,000. And, you know, we looked at, first we had the planning committee come before us, the head of the planning board, and he left us with an impression that it would be okay if we went with a part-time planner. He left that impression with some of us.
Thank
And
you.
with others, didn't feel that way. When we read the documentation that came out of the planning board from all their members, it was kind of a toss-up. 3 of them were looking for a planner. 3 of them didn't think we needed a planner. 2 of them didn't care either way. So that kind of made some of us on the budget committee think that, okay, maybe this year isn't the year for a planner. So we did put in the $20,000 as kind of seed money for a part-time planner, or we could go out and hire a consultant for whatever we may need.
And I just would throw in that we put these on the last slide here because these were the 2 items, the legal and the planner. These were the 2 items that we did debate a lot within our committee and came to a compromise on both of them.
The next one is the landfill account. And again, what we did this year is we did not fund the landfill account. But what you have in front of you is a chart showing that the projected closure is 2018, I believe now. And on the left, you'll see with the $100,000 added in, if we were to put it in, at 2018, you would have $8.8 million. Without, and that's in the green on the right-hand side, in 2018, you would have $8.3 million. Now, the estimates up on the top for the closure of the landfill is anywhere from $8 million to $10 million. We also went with a $400,000 assumption for a pay-as-you-throw, and last year's actually came in at $422,000. So we're hoping that that will increase as the years go on. We have 5 years to get that money in there. And we'll look at this every year. If we think next year that we're falling behind and we need to put that money in, then we'll definitely put it in. But we didn't think that it was needed for this year. Any other comment?
No, I would just comment, yes, that we promised last year to look at it again, and I think it is a good idea to look at it every year, and the council also agreed in their budget that maybe we didn't have to put it in this year. If you want to see more of the information that went into this, like how we came at using a 3% interest and what the pay-as-you-throw income has been, we do have a 2-pager that kind of walks you through a lot more data than this on this slide, on the town's website under the budget committee.
Can I just jump in?
Yes.
I was going to say, I think we all read the report, PAR report on the landfill, and it is, at best, you know, it's an estimate, this price. I mean, we don't really know what the actual cost definitely is going to be. It could be more, and we may have to float a small bond. That's the idea, is try to to avoid floating bonds, but we're accomplishing quite a bit with what we put in, so I'm comfortable myself that if we get to that point and it is $1 million, $1.5 million more, that the town could absorb a small bond. So the threat of not putting the 100,000 in, I don't know. I understand where the committee was trying to go. They were trying, so we didn't, we had enough money in there, we didn't have to do that. But we have needs in the now. I mean, we're barely putting enough money in, to keep our roads and our infrastructure afloat, and we have equipment needs like you would not believe. So, I mean, there's a fine line we had to dance, so no insult. We're not trying to insult a committee that worked long and hard on this, but it's just a reality, I think, at this time.
Yes. That's it.
That's it.
That's it for the slides. I would just point out to you in the docket, which I don't have up on the screen, page 2 gives you a summary of how we arrive at our estimates for the tax rate and how we determine the tax levies. Pages 3 through 19 is the line item expense budget. The revenue budget starts on page 20 and goes through page 22. These are all the line items that will be in the detail line item expense and revenue budgets for the town if, well, I suppose the proposal will be approved. Then you have some summary pages. You have I-1 is a revenue summary page that we've seen for many, many years. Same with I-2 and I-3 on the municipal and school expenses.
Just to jump back to I-1 and I-2, if you look at the bottom of I-1, you'll see 47,149,305, or 2.8%. And if you look at the bottom for the general operating expenses budget, you'll see the same number of 47,149,305 with a 2.8, and that means that we do have a balanced budget with those two pages.
Right, and I-1 gives you a little, the revenue summary is, I've said it before, it's one that I've always liked because it gives you a picture of where, outside of tax revenues, where does the town get money? So you can see what the education aid is, what other monies we're getting from the state for helping with the school bonds and our share of meals and beverage and public service corp tax, etc. And then under the local funding sources, when you look through the line item revenue, you always get lost in the dog licenses and liquor licenses and yada, 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 yada licenses. And this gives you one nice total for all the miscellaneous fees. Expenses, school expenses on page I-3 gives you a little bit of breakdown for the school expenses by departments. I just want to note that the school, the town and the FTR, we appropriate a total amount for the school. We don't approve a budget for the school. We appropriate a bottom line amount. The state really oversees their budget, and the state has set up what they call a uniform charter of accounts, so that all the schools within the state can be viewed and their budgets compared from across different schools. So what you see here is the roll-up according to that into the different departments that correspond to the uniform charter accounts. So there's all kinds of information online if you want to go comparing schools across different cities and towns. And you'll also see on the bottom there the capital items and improvements that the school is making. I-4 through I-6, yes, is a comparison of the municipal budget by departments. So the totals that you see under the line items in the detail expense budget kind of, it gives you a look at this current fiscal year versus next year, 2014, and some comparisons. I-7 walks you through the due diligence that the committee does to look at the amount of money that's left in the general fund, the general fund surplus, and what we look at and what the council looks at also in decision on whether or not there are enough surplus funds to withdraw to offset taxes. And both the Budget Committee and the Town Council, $140,000 is not enough to make a dent in anything, and we're better off keeping it in there. And also our checks to make sure that we're not over the cap, and a little bit else. I-8 and I-9 are, we had in the, I don't know if we had them right in the docket last year, but it's a look back over the past 10 years. And there's 4 main sections. The first section is the numbers, the actual hard numbers. These are budget, not actual, expenses and revenues. So from 2003 to 2012, you see all the numbers that were approved at the financial town meeting. And then 2013, which is the FTR. And the expenses are on the left-hand side. You see the school column, debt service, and municipal. And then the revenue budget has state and the local receipts, all those miscellaneous fines and money from the power plant, et cetera, is local receipts. In prior years, what we had approved to withdraw from the general fund, and then you have a total, and abatements if they were explicitly approved, and then you have the total tax levy. So you can see side by side what revenues came from something other than the tax levy. The 3 boxes that follow all work off of those total numbers. The second box on the bottom of page I-8 gives you the allocation over the year. Think back to the chart we showed of the 61% being school and whatever it was for municipal.
And a debt
Yeah. You can see in the expenses on the left-hand side on the bottom of page I-8 that in 2013, the schools got 61% of total expenses, and municipal was 31%. If you go back to 2003, you'll see that the school in 2003 was 65%, and the municipal was 33%. Debt was only 1.8%. So the debt has increased. Its piece of the pie has gotten bigger. It's gone up to 8%. And the school has gone down to 61%, and the municipal has gone down to 31%. On page I-9, you'll see year-over-year comparisons. The first box is just dollars, what the actual dollar increase in the approved budgets were. And then the second box is percent change, year-over-year percent change with 5 and 10-year averages on the bottom. What Mr. Perry was talking about is if you look on the top box where the actual dollars are, and you go to the 09-10, so that would be fiscal year 09 versus fiscal year 10. Fiscal year 09 was the 2008 financial town meeting. That's what we were voting on. And you'll see in that year, we lost $752,000 from state funds, and we had a decrease of $335,000 in anticipated local receipts. And there was no money to withdraw from the general fund. The year prior to that, we had pulled out $900,000, and there was nothing left to offset taxes. Then you'll see in the next comparison, we lost $1.5 million of state funds. So first, I think the first big hit was the state revenue sharing, and the second big hit was we're not going to reimburse you for the state motor vehicle exemption that we said we were going to reimburse you for. So you can see, if you look down in the bottom chart, that 0809 line, the change from fiscal year 8 to fiscal year 9, you'll see that the tax levy went up 11.2% that year. And gee, why did that happen? Well, you'll see the bond debt service went up 44.7%, 45%. You'll see that we lost 12% in local receipts. Am I on the right line here? Yeah. And that the total of revenues without the levy was down almost, it was 9.6%. So the revenues were down 9.6%, debt was up 45%, and the levy was up 11%. Now, since that time, the annual increases have been, for the most part, much lower. Enough said.
Okay. Now we'll... Okay, Joe?
There's one item in this budget that I totally opposed. It comes under town administrator, professional, municipal dues. And it was the dues for the League of Cities and Towns. I was recently at the State House and spoke with the lobbyist, Dan Beardsworth, and asked him why that the League of Cities and Towns didn't take a position against the Sconnet River Bridge tolls. They in fact voted, their committee in fact voted to stay neutral on the issue. It apparently voted twice after our representatives had pleaded with them. I see no reason to pay dues to an organization that's not even willing to help the towns that it proposes to support. So I'll just leave that to the council.
Okay, you're next.
Okay.
Your resolution.
The Town Council resolution is resolved that pursuant to Section 204 of the Town Charter, the Town Council is hereby authorized to transfer ownership of any of the following of Tiverton's municipally owned buildings: Nonquit School, Judson Street Community Center, the Senior Center, Town Hall, and DPW facility, provided that any such transfer is at not less than fair market value. And this is a continuation of a resolution to allow us to sell town property if need be.
All set?
For questions?
Okay, now we'll take questions. But before you come up, I just want to remind people that the budget was submitted on April 7th. The numbers are final. We're not here to have long discussions or argue with anyone. We'll listen to you, and we'll take your advice for next year or whatever it may be. But the budget is already set, so proceed.
Is this high enough for if the
Ask
school
Mr.
committee
Bettis.
had any comments, I'd defer to them. I think they did it absolutely.
Jay, we can't hear you.
Use the other
Which
Try the other
is
one.
it? I was trying to say that
There you
I
go.
was going to defer to the school department if they have anything to add, ready, because I think they've done an excellent job. I don't think there's any reason for them to answer anything. I took down a number of notes, and at least put this under the heading of comments and questions. Because while I took down a number of notes, I really decided that most of my concerns were probably matters of discretion, differences of opinion. But I draw the line on one issue, because I think it represents more than just a matter of second-guessing a committee. And that's the landfill. When the landfill committee appeared before the budget committee, we were told that the budget committee took the position, at least at that point, that you anticipated that the closure was going to cost $8 million or $8.5 million. I think the landfill committee made it clear at that point that they had absolutely no idea at all where you came up with that number. But I want to clarify some of the numbers. And I think, having read the PAR engineering report a number of times, I think I have the numbers fairly well memorized. When you people first began your deliberations on this budget, let me make it clear, you had a report from PAR Engineering from 2012 that said the cost of closing that landfill was going to be $9.7 million if the landfill was closed in 2018. As to the timetable, there is no report from PAR Engineering that has ever indicated that that closure was going to be in January of 2018. They've written 4 reports, and in every one of those reports, they've clearly indicated that the closing was going to be between January 1st, 2017, and January 1st, 2018. That's a difference of a year, and it's a big difference. During the deliberations, PAR Engineering, quite by coincidence, issued another report, which I assume you received. And in that report, they indicated that the closure could be as much as $10 million. And again, in that report, they indicated the closure time period. The timetable that they were using was January 1st of 2017 to January 1st of 2018. The reason for my concern is that when the town council asked the landfill committee to put together a proposal and a plan for the pay-as-you-throw program, they were asked to come up with a promise that the cost of the bags that we would be paying for the most part, would represent the payment for the closure. We were asked to come up with numbers that wouldn't change at least for the next 5 years. That is, we were told we want a $1 bag and a $2 bag. You still have a $1 bag, you still have a $2 bag. But I think the most important thing that we promised the voters and the taxpayers in this town when we adopted the pay-as-you-throw program was, we promised we're going to do our very best with the appropriations that we have to make sure if this closure comes sometime between 2017 and 2018, we will not, Mr. Souza, have to go out for a bond. You sat through a number of those meetings, and you know that that promise was made. What you've done is cut $168,000 from the appropriation. Last year, you're cutting out $168,000. This year, and over a 5-year period, that's going to add up to something like $1.1 million.
840,000.
Despite all of these numbers, despite what you want to do with the numbers, and I'm not being critical, Dave, of you. I don't know what role you played in all of this. But the point is, you're setting up a budget that's bound to fail. You know right well that if you keep cutting the appropriation of $168,000 year by year over the next 3.5 or 4.5 years, you're going to have to put out a bond. And that's exactly what we promised the voters and the taxpayers in Tiverton we would not do. Now I did have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Can I just go back to that for a minute, Mr. Lambert, because we had a lengthy discussion with the landfill subcommittee, and I think just recently they came and did an update for the council. There was a lot of discussion about that, and I think what I heard that we're going to reach capacity, which we discussed at the budget committee meeting in 2017. I can't speak for everyone on the budget committee, but I think our logic was that we reach capacity in 2017. There's 120 days, I think. Then we start the closure process, the construction, then we pay. So that's why we say closure sometime in 2018. We don't say January. Expected closure in 2018. And the cost we used was somewhere between 8 and 10 million. Now, at the time when the landfill subcommittee came, and we had this discussion with the budget committee, we initially thought we had heard your subcommittee say 8.5. That's why we used that preliminarily. But it's not really our position that there is a specific cost. It's 5 years out, everything is an estimate at this point. So we used a range, and we really focused on looking at what are the best estimates that we can use to get a sense of what monies will be available from the restricted landfill account, given the net pay-as-you-throw income as well as the interest income. So I just want to get that on the table, that, it's not as if the landfill subcommittee and the budget committee didn't have discussions. We did. And I also would just like to note also that it gave us an additional level of comfort when the council budget and the council voted, and I think you were also in agreement with that maybe this year we didn't have to put the 100,000. We were off the 160-odd thousand down to 100,000, that wouldn't be necessary this year. So just to get that all on the table.
I'll ask a couple of questions.
Okay.
But I think we can agree, and unfortunately, we don't have the car engineering report with us tonight. But I think we can agree their last estimate in January of 2012, which was the only estimate, the last estimate you had before you began your deliberations, the number was $9.7 million. And the estimate for the timetable was January 1st to January 1st, 2017 to 20.
Right, to reach capacity.
Okay.
We agree on that.
Those, as far as I'm concerned, knowing nothing about the subject, are the best numbers. Let me ask you just two questions so that the taxpayers know where we're going in the next 3.5 or 4.5 years. I want you to assume we have no appropriation in the budget for the landfill. And I want you to assume, as Power Engineering has said, that we will be required to close the landfill between January 2017 and January 2018. Will we have enough money?
The real answer? No.
Okay.
Well, we won't have $9
We
million.
don't have $9 million.
That's right.
Unless we revisit it next year and get our estimates better.
And I think that's an absolutely honest answer.
And even if
We're
it,
not going to have the money when we have to come up with the closure.
I think,
Because we don't have the appropriation of $168,000 a year.
well, we said that we would look at it every year. I mean, we're not proposing it this year. It doesn't mean next year we're not going to put it in. If we think that we need it for next year, again, when they came before us, we used an estimate on the charts that you saw of $400,000. I believe last year, the income from pay-as-you-throw was $422,000.
No, I do know the numbers.
It wasn't
The
422?
estimate by the previous estimate by the landfill committee had been that we would raise for that year $455,000, and I'm telling you that we raised $488,000
Okay.
net as a result of the sale of the bags.
Okay, so it was an extra $88,000 that we didn't even anticipate.
Now, this is my second question. Assume the very same facts that I just gave you for the timetable. And I want you to assume that Power Engineering was right in January of 2012. That the cost of the closure in 2018 is going to be $9.7 million. Do we have enough money?
I think, Mr. Lambert, I'd just like to get two things on the table. Just so that the town isn't, I would encourage everyone to look at the month-by-month income that we receive from pay-as-you-throw.
By the way, I do that. I do that every month.
Right. I think you might see that some of the money from the 2013 or 2012 came from June 2011. So we want to make sure that we're all dealing with apples and apples. So that's probably the first thing that we should get on the same page. It would be nice to know exactly how much we received during a fiscal year. The 9.7 million,
I can tell you what we received for the last 12 years as of last month.
Okay,
We received
12 months.
$488,000.
Okay,
For a full month,
right.
full 12 months.
The power engineering report that estimated a $9.7 million closure cost, right, that used an inflator that had a I think it was 3 or 3.5% inflation rate built in. So depending on the price of oil, depending on the price of petroleum, depending on what exact kind of closure method we use, that's why that estimate was given as 8 to 10 million, because there's a lot of variables. I think,
Where you're going with that answer is, and your answer to my question is no. We
No,
will
if it
not
costs
have
$9.7
$9.7 million without the appropriation that you have been making in the budget. We're not going to make it.
answer this,
And we would not make it even if we put the 168 in,
right, but
because that would only increase
right.
it $840,000.
But we will know,
$840,000.
You're going to take 168,000,
Right.
multiply it by 6, and add interest.
I'm sorry,
for each
over a
of
million-
those
over a
5
million-
years,
it's over $1 million.
Which Laura has estimated will be between, I don't agree with this, 3.0 and 3.5%. The 9.7 is a high number. We've always recognized that. And we know what the adjustments have to be, what adjustments have to be made if it ends up at that high number. Nobody on the landfill committee has ever expected it's going to be 9.7 or $10 billion. But we've certainly indicated repeatedly, and we've repeated over the last 2 years before the budget committee, that it was definitely going to be over $9 million. You're not going to make it. And I think it's time to be honest with the voters and the taxpayers and agree with Joe. Let's tell them, you're going out for bonds of about 3.5 or 4.5.
I think it's not proper to say now that what we will have to do 5 years from now. There is a possibility, Mr. Lambert,
With all
that
due
we may
respect,
have to
Laura,
do that.
It is proper, because if you don't feel that you can put up the $168,000 today, where are you going to come up with the money in the next budget and the budget after that?
I would say
We're
that-
now talking about $300,000 to make up for the shortfalls of the last 2 years. You're not going to make it.
I would say this, that the Budget Committee came to this decision, just speaking as one person, that we did not think it was a wise use of taxpayer dollars to put in additional monies into the landfill account when it was still so much of an estimate. Now, as we get closer to the closure date, we'll know more, and we'll have a better sense of where we are. That's why we revisit it again this year, and we'll revisit it again next year, and no doubt through the course of the year.
With all due respect, Laura, I'm just going to make one more comment. One more comment, and that is, I don't think we should be looking to the future. I don't think we should be looking to next year to make a decision as to whether we can answer these questions, these 2 questions, with a yes. You should be able to tell the taxpayers right now, we're going to have the money to pay cash, and we're not going to follow Joe's recommendation to go out for a bond.
Can I finish?
If I could just, for a second, just jump in here. You know, obviously, the landfill was a big debate on the council, as you well know. And this year, we agreed not to fund it in order to facilitate an additional $100,000 that we did not anticipate being put into the police fund. Going forward, as Mr. Lambert has said, and as we have looked at those numbers, the original plan, even with pay-as-you-throw, was for that $168,000 to be included. As we get closer to the date of closure, we're already behind the 8 ball by then. So I think going forward and starting, as you say, the budget process starts the day after this budget is approved, that we have to seriously consider that we need to put those funds in, because we cannot wait until we get very close to the closure date and realize that we may be $1 million short.
And I think we're in agreement with that. Like I said before, you know, we wanted a full year behind us to take a look at what the income was going to be and where we would have to go. I did read both PAR reports, all 31 pages of them. And what the PAR report gives you is the worst-case scenario. Worst-case scenario. And that's where maybe that's where your $9.7 million comes from. I don't know. Sal?
Sally Black, Tiverton School Committee. I'd just like to read 3 sentences from a resolve that was passed on the 24th day of September 2007 by the Tiverton Town Council. And it says, whereas the Tiverton Town Council, School Committee, and Budget Committee have come together to work collaboratively for the past 3 years to submit a budget to the financial town meeting. And I'd like to say that it happened again this year, and I'd like to thank everyone on the Town Council, the Budget Committee, and all the people that came to hear every number during this cold winter, and everyone did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Out of my archives.
Any other comments?
I just want to say this,
Oh, my sleep, Jerry.
you know, we receive packages that start off, it's a binder, it's about 4 inches thick, and then that binder grows to about 8 inches thick of requests of different information. And I can tell you that pretty much every department head that appeared before us barely got a quarter of what they were looking for. And it's been called a wish list, but it's not. It's a needs list. These are equipment that would make their job easier, make the town safer when it comes to public safety. We had, I guess the recreation went before the council, talking about the condition of our fields and facilities, our recreational areas, our parks. You know, this town is taking a beating. Our roads are taking a beating. There's just so much that needs to be done. And I said in the beginning of this argument that when we get to the end of this landfill, we may have to, and I'm not going to lie to anybody, we may have to float a small bond. But we've put a lot of money away. We're not going to be floating a $10, $11 million bond. We're not going to see a huge tax increase. It'll be a small tax increase, because the bulk of it will be put away. But I don't think we can make it every year to be putting that money in, that extra $100,000, when we have so many needs. That's almost half what we're going to put into paving this year. I mean, it's, you know, we got other problems that we have to take care of. So that long-range plan has to have a little give and take.
Roger Bennett, Narragansett Avenue. I have a question regarding the statement that Mr. Tights made at the beginning of the meeting, indicating that if one person voted for this budget, it would pass. If that statement is true, then obviously the FTR vote is a farce, and something has to be changed in order to make it a democratic vote. If there's no possibility that there could be any other result. I've been under the impression that even though it's very unlikely, there was still probably a 1 in a million probability that if people showed up and did not like the budget that was being submitted, and there was only one budget, then if a person showed up to vote and did not check off voting for the budget, that would be taken as a negative vote.
No.
So theoretically, if not in actuality, that was a way to vote no on the budget. If that isn't true, then there's a big problem with the FTR, and people have to change the FTR to make it a democratic vote instead of a farce.
Well, let me just say, it's not a farce. I think it's an oversight, and we have people here who worked very hard on drafting the stuff for the FTR. I think the assumption that most people made was that there would be more than one budget each year. The problem with it is requiring the election. It should really be the way it is in many towns. Most towns that don't have an elected budget committee, the town council adopts the budget. And then if there is a petition for people who want to present an alternate budget, and it goes to either a town meeting or an all-day referendum at that point. But if there is no challenge, if you will, to the adopted budget, then it just becomes law. And in fact, that would be the sensible thing to amend the charter, to say if there isn't the alternate budget, then the budget committee's budget becomes the budget, and we don't need to have the expense of holding an election.
If that were true, I don't think the FTR would have passed.
Well, that's not for me to decide. It's pretty clear in the way the FTR is written that the option was not given to simply say no to it. The option was given, if you don't like it, you cannot just complain. You have got to come and develop your own budget to challenge it. It's not enough to simply say, no, I don't like any budget, and keep voting it down. If you recall, this came kind of on the heels a year after the thing with Portsmouth and how they went time after time with their meeting and voting no, and it also came after the issues with Tiverton and the meeting and that idea of, people say no, well, but what's the alternative? And we have to keep doing it until we get it. So I interpret the way this was written to say that that's the only alternative. If you don't like the budget, you must come up with your own. Otherwise, it's there. And as I said, if there's one vote for it, we never count undervotes in this sort of thing. We never count the people who don't vote for
Where
something
is
who
that
show up.
written, that you do not count undervotes?
It's
If
the
the
way
person
that,
shows up to vote and doesn't vote for it, then it's because there is no check mark to
it's the
vote
way,
against.
it's the way we do it, it's the way we do it for every other election. If Senator Whitehouse is
Then
running
isn't it time to
unopposed.
do it right?
If Senator Whitehouse is running unopposed, and there are, 10,000 people that vote, and there are only 30 votes or 1,000 votes in favor, we don't say, oh, he's not elected. No, you have to have a vote like that. That's the way I see it. And believe me, I started off thinking the way you did. I started off thinking it doesn't make sense to have an election. Why vote if you can't vote no? And
That's what I say.
that's what I thought.
It's a farce.
But it's not a farce.
It's not a democratic vote if you
It's-
can't vote no.
It's an oversight in the way it's drafted because it's the assumption that there would always be more than one.
You know
But
what
it clearly,
assumptions are, and I won't repeat that
I know,
here in
and
public.
I understand it, and I didn't draft it. You can take that up with the people who drafted the FTR proposal. But as I read it, it is absolutely clear that they did not intend there to be no budget. If someone had a problem with it, they could come up with their alternative budget, but you couldn't just say no so that the town would be left in limbo.
I know that in many people who worked on the FTR committee, that was not the philosophy. The philosophy was there has to be an alternative.
If
I
I
think
could just,
that really means that the FTR needs to be changed.
if I could just, when we were going through the FTR process, and some of you may remember, I kept saying there is no, absolutely in that charter amendment, to vote no. And I kept saying there is no way to reject a budget, whether it's one budget, two budgets, or three budgets. And I brought that point up and kept saying there is no place to vote no. And by staying home or showing up and not voting, that is not a no vote because it's not recorded. So the charter amendment probably does need work and does need to be revised.
It
but
does.
It is what it is. It is the law in Tiverton at this point, and that's where we are.
It sounds like it's the law by interpretation.
Mr.
No,
Bennett,
it's
it's
the
not
law.
interpretation. There is a lot of background information on this charter amendment. The committee that worked on it continually put before the council, almost every meeting, what changes they made and why they made them. And it's clearly stated in there that they wanted finality. They wanted it to happen and be done with. And that we're very much aware, and it's in there, I'll get you copies of what I have in my office, that they did not want the no. They were well aware that there was no option for you to vote no. The only alternative you have is to bring forward an alternate petition.
If that was really true, then somebody really messed up by not adding the statement in there. If no alternate budget is proposed by a certain date, then the budget committee's budget will be adopted, because what you're really saying is that the FTR vote when there is no second option is a farce. It's a
Mr.
vote
Bennett, you
or
were
no
at
vote.
some of the hearings, and it absolutely is true that's the backup. But you were at many of the hearings as well. This was debated and debated and debated. However, I can tell you this, that there are other little issues that need to be tweaked out on there, and that was the exact words that the committee used. We know there's going to be things that needed to be tweaked. I find this a little more than just a tweaking, but we're still trying to work out some of the little issues with this, and when we can get everything together, then we'll have to have the council consider getting a charter review commission. But there's some things that haven't even, you're not even addressing that little problems that come up. But right now, we're able to get through the process as the people voted for it to be. It was well publicized.
The legality check is also missing. It was thrown out. They started with a legality check, and then because of comments and people that objected to it, it was discarded. So by discarding a legality check, it means that you can have illegal things put in the budget. That's another farce.
Can I just jump in for a minute and remind those who might be watching on TV that in addition to the proposal, there are resolutions to vote for, 5 from the Budget Committee that we urge you to vote yes on, 1 from the council that I'm sure they urge you to vote yes on, as does the Budget Committee urge you to vote yes on. So, yeah, yes.
And I just have one more comment before we end. The Budget Committee, at one of our last meetings, made a recommendation that we think we should get together with the school committee and the town council sometime in late August, so we can look at the results, kind of like what you're talking about, Mr. Lambert, so we can see where we are. We want to look at last year's numbers, see if we made any kind of mistakes, what our carryovers were, what they weren't, where we were, if we missed anything that we shouldn't have. And we'd like to look at those numbers in August. And then we'd like to sit down again sometime in November and start the process of what our priorities are going to be for the following year. So I would just mention that tonight, and hopefully we can get that, a workshop or whatever it might be, together sometime at the end of August and again in November, because it is a work in progress. It's like we just got done saying, when the budget ends, it starts. So we'd like to continue our process also, with working with the town council and working with the school committee and continuing it on the whole year, right through the year.
I just want to add that, first of all, I want to thank the Budget Committee and the School Committee and the Town Administrator and the rest of the Council. For those who've been around for a while, I think this Council probably spent more time on the budget than any previous councils had. And it is a long and tedious process, and not everybody gets what they want. And I agree with David that we need to start the process earlier and look at the numbers. And again, even going forward, no one's going to get 100% of what they want, but bottom line is I think all of us are here to do one thing, and that one thing is what's in the best interest of the town of Tiverton. So I think that's what we all have to keep in mind. So again, I want to thank everybody who was involved in the process.
Thank you.
No other questions? No questions about the procedure, the financial town referendum, the voting process, anything like that? Then we can adjourn the meeting.
Do you need a motion?
Budget Committee, you all